Today we'll be solving May June 2023 paper 21 15-mark question. It's a fairly easy question and the code is also not that lengthy. So first of all, we'll try to plan the program and then we'll visualize and then we'll write the code. So we have the 1D array called days, which consists of the name of days of the week. So there would be 7 indices in this array. Then a 2D array called readings, which is used to store 24 temperature readings taken once an hour. So it will have 24 readings for each of the 7 days of the week. All right. Then we have a 1D array called average temp that is used to store the average temperature for each day of the week. Okay, first of all, before we proceed further, we need to create some dummy data and we need to visualize it for our convenience so we understand the problem. So first of all, we have this 1D array called days, and here we'll have all the 7 weekdays, and then the question says that we need to save 24 readings for each day of the week. So it will have the same number of rows as per the number of days in a week, this 2D array reading, and then it will have 24 columns. Why is it 24 columns? Because if you read it this way, if I ask you what is at the first index of days, you can tell me Monday, and then you can tell me that the first day's readings are R1 is 3, R2 is 3, R3 is 5, R4 is 44, so on and so all the way till 24. So this is the most intuitive way of setting up this problem. So if you had taken these number of columns as number of rows, let's say if you had extended them till 24, so this would have kind of messed up the whole program. And they always give this hint in the program statement that the indices mapping is the same. So index 4 of reading and Wednesday average temperature is in the index 4 of average temperature, and similarly its day name is also in the days array index 4. All right, so this is the major hint of how you have to arrange your array. All right, so again, if we have Friday here, Friday is at the 5th index, so we're looking at the 5th row, 24 hours from 1 till 24, and then it will have some average value at the 5th index of average temp array. So this is all we need to look at. Again, it extremely helps you in the exam if you can actually create some dummy values before you start attempting the program and you start writing the code. Okay, the temperature values are set to 1 decimal place. So the temperatures can only be from -20 till +50 inclusive. That means we need to include them in the range as well. Okay, so we need to input and validate the hourly temperatures for 1 week. So input and validate. By validation, we mean that there must be some sort of a conditional loop present. So we should have conditional loop here that could be repeat until, or it could be while. Otherwise, if you just use an if condition here, you will lose marks. Calculate and store the average temperature for each day of the week. By that, it means that when you have 24 values for one day, you need to add them together and divide it by 24 to get the average. Simple mathematics. Then we have average temperature. Then we have to convert all the average temperatures from Celsius to Fahrenheit by using this formula. So convert and then output the average temperature in Celsius and in Fahrenheit for each day, and then we need to calculate the overall average temperature in Celsius and Fahrenheit for each day. So here are some things that we need to do. First of all, we need to take input from the user for these values. Then we need to find the average temperature for one day, and then once we have done that, we'll have 7 different averages for 7 days, and then we need to find the average of these averages. All right, you must use pseudocode or any program code. You do not need to declare any arrays. Must contain suitable messages, and all the data must be rounded to 1 decimal place, and you'll need to initialize and populate the days array. So even if they're not written that, you cannot assume that the days array is initialized until and unless they have told you clearly in the exam. So this is the question statement, and this question is pretty straightforward. So let's jump into it. All right, so first of all, we have to initialize the array for days, and that's pretty simple. So days index 1, that will be Monday. Then days index 2, that will be Tuesday, and then we'll have the same thing all the way till day 7. So I'm not going to repeat that. Sunday. Okay, and we can add comments as we go along. Please remember, you have to add comments because there are marks for adding comments. And here we'll say initializing days array. Days array. You need to do this completely. Okay, I'm just skipping it for now. All right. Then in the next part, we need to save values in the 2D array of reading. So in order to do that, first of all, we need to iterate through the 2D array. This is how the 2D array would look like. So we'll go to the first row, first column, second, third, fourth, fifth. So the outer loop should be row number and inner loop should be the column number. So that is how we'll iterate row wise. Okay, for each row we'll also need to find some total because we also need to output the average as well. So there are two ways of doing this. We can either create another array called totals and save all the totals individually at each index, or we can just create one variable total and just reset it. So here we'll set total equal to some value, let's say 335, and before we go to the next row we'll set it to 0. All right, so here this is what we can do. We will keep resetting the values before we go to the next day. All right, so we can start here. So for the outer loop should be for row 1 2, or we can say for days 1 to 7, and then hours, however it suits you. So I'll go rows 1 to 7. Okay, so as I said, we need to reset the temperature as we go along before we enter each row. So here I'll do that. This code will run. So resetting total before going to next day. So here I'll say today temperature is set to 0, 0.0 in fact, because all the values are real. Okay, since now it's set to 0, so now we can start calculating our total. All right, so for now we've only selected the row. Now we need to go through each of the columns, and as you might know that we do that using nested loops. So for column 1 to 24, and first we'll get current temperature, or you can say get hourly temperature from user. So here we'll ask the user to input some temperature, enter hourly temperature, input temp, like this. Now the user is going to input some value for the temperature. It could be any value. The question is clearly said that it should be between 20 to 50, minus 20 to 50, and they are in Celsius and they should be in one decimal place. So here we also need to remember that all the data has to be rounded. All right, so we use the round function that works like this. We pass in a number and then we pass it with some decimal places. All right, so we input the temperature. Now we need to validate it, and as I said, it must be done with the conditional loop. So here we'll say, or here we can also use the repeat until. So repeat until temp is greater than equal to minus 20 and temp is less than equal to 50, like that. And repeat, I'll say output enter valid hourly temperature, input temp, like this. All right, so until and unless the temperature is between this value range, it will not be accepted, and this loop will keep on repeating no matter how many times. All right, okay, so once we have the temp, an appropriate temp, let's say we have a value of 10 degrees, so we now need to round it off to one decimal place. So temp is equal to round temp comma 1. So this means, let's say if you have a value of 20.523, so this will be rounded off to 20.5, like this. All right, okay, so then we have to save this value. So now we got one value, one valid value. I'll delete these values. Initially the array would be empty. Okay, so now this is empty now. So we got one value, we need to save it. So we need to go from this row to this column, save the value, then first row, second column, then first row, third column. So we keep on repeating the same procedure 24 times. And that is exactly what our code is doing. So we save the value in the readings array, readings, row, comma, column, temp. Okay, so what does this mean? So initially row would be 1, column would be 1. So whatever the temperature we inputted would be saved in this place. Then we'll have next call like this. So the column would become 2. So here we'll have row 1, column 2, and it will go to the second index, and then next call would again run this same thing for the third time. So the call value would be 3, so this should be 1 comma 3, so on and so forth. So I'll bring back the next call. So far here we have inputted the value from the user and rounded to one decimal place and saved it in the readings array, rounding temperature and saving in reading. Okay, now one more thing to do. It says you need to store the average temperature, calculate and store the average temperature of each day of the week. And so in order to do that, you also need to find the totals. For average, we are given this array. For totals, they have left it to our discretion. So we can either use an array, as we said, we can make another array called totals, and we can assign the values based on the indices. So for Monday, the total can come at this point. For Tuesday, it can come at this point, so on and so forth. But it's totally up to you. I'll just keep it simple. I'll use one variable, as I said before, and I'm just resetting it every time we go to the next day. It's called today temp. So what we need to do is, I'll just say today temp is equal to today temp plus the value that we had saved, temp. All right, this is the value that we got from the user for the current day. This is the value we rounded off, and we saved it in the readings array, and we just need to add it to our today's temperature as well, the totaling part. Okay, so here we'll say calculating total temperature of the day. So once this whole loop has ran, it would have calculated the sum of all these values and would have saved them in the total. Let's say the total is now maybe 52.5. So this is the total we have here. Okay. And before we go to the next row, now we need to do some stuff. So let's look at that as well. It says calculate and store the average temperature for each day of the week. So only once you have the sum of all the days in of all the values in the day, you can find the average temperature. And then you also need to do the same thing for the whole week. So we can do that afterwards because we'll be saving the values in the average array. And then it says that we also need to convert all the average values in Fahrenheit from Celsius. Okay, so we're getting the value in Celsius. So let's do that. Let's find the average for the day. Again, the reason we are doing it outside the loop because inside the loop we are finding the sum of all 24 hours. Okay, we cannot find the average until and unless the sum is already there. Today average, let's call the today average. You can name the variable whatever you want. We'll have today temp divided by 24 because today temp, this should be today temp, or maybe you can call it total or whatever you like. Okay, so this was the total for the 24 hours. Now we are dividing it by 24 in order to get the average that will save here. So this is the day average, and then we need to convert this into Fahrenheit. So in order to do that, let's call it Fahrenheit FT average maybe. And so for that today average, and in order to convert it we need to multiply it by 9 by 5 plus 32. So just copy paste this 9 by 5 plus 32 like this. All right, you can also put the brackets around it like this. So this will get you the average day average in Fahrenheit. All right, so this is done, and now we just need to output them. As the question says, all the data output must be rounded to one decimal place, and we're already saving the data in one decimal place, so we don't need to use the round function again. Or the other option could have been you could have skipped this line here. I'll comment it, and then when you were outputting the value, you could have said output average, comma round day average, comma 1. So both of these are acceptable. All right. So now we'll output the values, outputting day average in Celsius and Fahrenheit. So we'll say average temperature. I think we also need to output the day as well. Calculate the output the average temperature for each day. Yes. So you need to output the day of the week as well. Again, it's not very clearly written, so that is the point where you have to deduce on your own what should be outputted for the best case scenario so that the user can actually understand what is being provided to them. So here we should also output the day name, otherwise it's pretty useless if you just print out 7 averages. So average temperature in Celsius for comma, so we have days. Okay, now days is a 1D array. Okay, so again, if you remember that these indices are directly mapped. So third index means the third row in the readings array, which also means the third index in this 1D array average 10. So these are the rows that we're looking at, and the outer loop is running for row number of times, 7. So here we have to use that index row. Okay, again, that would mean if row is set to, let's say, 3, so we'll be saving the value in days here. If row is set to 7, we'll be looking at Sunday, so on and so forth. So average temperature in Celsius for days from a row, and then you can say output today average like this. Or you can also do it in the same line, it's totally up to you. And then output average temperature in Fahrenheit for days row, and then the output day FTF. And with this, all of it is done. So far what we've achieved is we calculated the sum, we got 52.5. Then we calculated some average, let's say 39.5 in Celsius, and then we displayed that in the Fahrenheit. The only step missing is that we did not save this in the temperature average array. This is the array that we're looking at, average temperature array. We did not save it in that. We have just calculated the value. So in order to save there, so saving average day value in array. So the array is called average temp. So average temp index row saves today's average. So today's average was the average of the day in Celsius. So we are saying average temp index row save the today average. Again, the same reasoning. Since average temp is also the 1D array that we're looking at. So if the row is row's value is 1, so we'll be looking at index 1. If row number is 5, we'll be looking at 5, and row changes every time once the whole inner loop has ran completely. So with this, we can close the inner loop now. All right. On to the next part. It says output the overall average temperature in Celsius and Fahrenheit Very simple. So what we have to do now is essentially we have this average array ready. We just have to sum all these averages, and then we need to find the average of these averages, and then we need to output it in the very same way that we've done here. And one more thing, so next time when we go to the next row, we come to this point, it should become 2, and then today temp will be resetted to 0. So now the previous temperatures are not relevant anymore, it becomes 0, and then you can repeat the same procedure. So these values would not corrupt the data for all the other days. This is the reason why we set it to 0, because if I don't do that, and let's say if Monday's total was, let's say 50, so Tuesday's total would start adding into 50, which is incorrect. So now how do we find the sum of all these averages? We just simply do the totaling. So sum of averages. So for J1 to 7, let's say average sum is equal to average sum plus the array name is average temp index j, and you do next j, and average sum must be set to 0, 0.0, because these are real values. Okay, so what did it do is simply added all the values. 39.5 is the current value, average temp j, and average sum is initially 0, so this becomes 39.5. Then 13, you add 39.5 into 234.1, so you get the sum, and then you keep on doing this for 7 times. All right. In the last part, the question says output the overall average temperature in Celsius and in Fahrenheit for the whole week. So we need to do the same thing for the whole week now, outputting whole week average in Celsius and Fahrenheit. All right. So to get the overall average, first we need to divide this average by 7. Again, basic math. We have these 7 averages, we sum them together, and in order to find the average of averages, we did need to divide it by number of values, which is 7. So these are the overall, this is the overall average, and then FT overall average in Fahrenheit would be overall average times 9 by 5 plus 32. Again, you can put brackets around here to show priority. And then in the last part, we're going to output overall average temperature in Celsius is overall average, and then overall average temperature in Fahrenheit is overall Fahrenheit. And with this, the question ends. That's it.